Have I forgot anything? Yeah, it's like there's so many different strands, but I like the idea of anything before this moment isn't real, it's just a memory. So the moon, remembering, as soon as you're thinking what the moon, you're trying to remember and already you're going into memories. But being in touch with the moon now means you've lived right, you've slept right, you're healthy, you're alive to the moment. Usually we have, how many cups of coffee do you have to get through the day? We take the cup of coffee or the tea to pump us up, and we get a little more pumped up and gives us an extra hour or so awake, and then we might have another one to get through the next thing. I mean, the business world and the computer world runs on coffee. So, but if you have 5 cups of coffee a day to keep that going, that's pretty extreme. You're going to have a pretty hyped up day. But if you do that every day, and you last even a month of doing that, boy, it's going to have a significant effect on your health and your habits. You're going to feel you need to be that speeded up all the time. You've also already created a habit that becomes like a dependency. Then it's, how do you change it? How do you relax? How do you slow down? No, I got to have another cup of coffee. We get used to that habit as if it's secure, even when it's not. So our health, our moods, our stomach aches, our feelings of insecure, they're really just the signals. I'm not, how come I got off track with how I'm living? What habits are taking me off track now? So we accumulate, like, there's all kinds of, like, it's as if the moon's a tree. There's all these branches, and we accumulate all these different branches that go in different directions, and it's still all part of the same thing. But I gotta have my happy hour drink. I gotta have my 2 o'clock tea. Or I gotta have my cigar in the evening, or I gotta have some ice cream, or I gotta have a dessert. You know, I grew up almost always having a dessert after a meal. So I finish a nice meal. My instinct is, I want some sugar. I want something on top of this. Not good for me. It's not. But to me, that's normal. I look for that. So when I'm cooking for myself, I usually will have something sweet at the end, unless I really discipline myself and say, no, for a while I'm going to fast. I'm not going to do that. Oh, but do I feel like fasting? Do I feel like dealing with my habits? Do I feel like changing my habits? It's not what. So it's complicated, but tremendously insightful. It's so important to be able to understand someone's moon, to know them, to get close to them, to be helpful to them. So in our charts, the moon's in the horoscope layers. We had the zodiac wheel above, and you see all the pillars, the pillar with the different layers of consciousness for each planet. The moon is the bottom one. It's the fastest moving planet. It's not a planet. It's moving around every month. But it pulls the water. The moon pulls the water on the planet. So if you imagine an earth ball with the water on it, wherever the moon is, the water is pulled up towards that moon, and it makes an egg-like effect. So the water itself on the planet is this egg-like shape that's moving around based on where the moon is. Of course, the Earth's moving and spinning around each day. As it spins around, as it spins around, the moon is pulling the water up. So this affects our weather. This affects our temperature. Affects the clouds. So every day there's 2 high tides. 2 high tides are when the moon is right overhead and when the moon is right underneath. The low tides are the halfway points. So this is just the nature of how the water on the planet is. So the moon pulls the water. I mean, plants would not grow without the moon. You need the sunlight from the sun, but the moon pulls the water from the ground up through the roots, up the stem, up to the leaves, up to the flowers. The moon pulls the water up and lets things grow. So even for having a baby, by the time you've conceived, ideally you still need the 10 moon cycles to get a full-term baby. Because of that, it's almost impossible. It would be almost impossible, at least I think it would be almost impossible, to have it for a woman to conceive and have a baby on another planet. That without the moon cycle, there would be a tendency just to abort. Nothing would form properly. And even if they were on another planet and there wasn't our one moon, they certainly would have other instincts and other factors, and they wouldn't be exactly human. Yeah, so many incredible concepts behind the moon. So we can go into these things, but basically you want to think how you reflect, how you remember things, how secure you feel, where do you live, like how are you living, what do you eat, are you vegetarian, are you meat eater, what do you eat, what do you don't eat, like these things. So as those things come together between two people, the moons start meeting, and it feels good or feels bad. It has good habits or bad habits. Which ones win? In a relationship, does the bad habits win or do the good habits win? Or do they just continually fight it out? And it's amazing how you can get in a bad habit and be fighting for it when you're wrong all the time. You should be changing it, but you don't feel like it. So this is funny dynamics of what's life, what's dependency, what's codependency, what's feelings. You have to get the daily habits back in a good, healthy way. So anybody that's been on the street and doing drugs or stuff, they can't just suddenly stop taking drugs and start living properly. They don't know how to live day to day. They usually need to have a place where they can rehab and get daily meals and regular sleep and get used to they got to go through the withdrawal. And as they're withdrawing, they need to get this security to be able to sleep well, get up, have a regular pattern, have food, and not be threatened by the regular things. But it becomes a big battle if it's drugs or alcoholism or anything. I mean, phew, heard something this week about in the Philippines, they had to make a law that they can only have 2 or 3 ice cream vendors on one block because it's so hot. Everybody was having ice cream and everybody's getting fat and unhealthy from the sugar. In the States, it's pop and everything almost. So the moon goes through its tides. It's new moon to full moon. It fluctuates. It builds up one way, builds up the other. We remember something, we let it go. So it's a fluctuating thing. You can't fix it. It's just being that or just being this. But you look at a chart, you see someone's moon. What makes them feel secure? How do you get along with so it's how you get along with your mom or how your relationship with your mom. It's also your relationship as mom or as primary nurturer. Can you nurture someone else, or do you expect everyone to nurture you? Most guys, by the time they're dating and they get near a breast, they start acting like 2-year-olds and expect the girl to mother them. It's the last thing the girl needs. But this is a mechanic that goes on, a texture that we go through, and it's very diversified, and there's many, many choices of ways this can live, and it's hard to judge. But certainly you can see when someone's falling into bad habits, and then you can look and wonder, wow, how come that person has such good habits? Or how come they're holding their life together? Oh, but it would take a lot of work to have those good habits. I don't know if I want to give up my bad habits to have those good habits. There's a bad moon attitude. So changing habits, changing security habits, you have to, just changing habits, you have to make someone feel secure, you have to be there, and they need a little attention for a while to rebuild. If you find a starving cat on the road, a kitten abandoned, you take it home, you have to feed it for a little bit and hug it and touch it and make sure it's okay before it feels secure and starts to play. So, okay, the ability of reflecting, how you reflect, where you've come from, everything before this moment, that's your moon. It's always processing. It's a huge factor. And it justifies or doesn't justify things. Like if someone hates their mom and they're growing up and you're an adult and you want to meet them, but they still have a big hate relationship with their mom, you get close to them, you're walking into that. It doesn't mean it can't change, but it gets challenging. So these are the textures of how we discover the moon. I mean, we could go on for hours and hours about the moon. I'm just trying to get enough so we have a sense of it. What is it as it's in a sign? We're going to go through different categories, and it's the categories that's affecting how we reflect, how we remember, how we feel secure. And that reflection will condition certain types of behavior and certain types of habit patterns. Building blocks, cornerstones to what am I living for if I don't have some security, I don't have this. So it sets up an attitude to your foundation and to getting close. And anyone that's gotten close to you would have had to run into your moon. The other things, if they got close and it's personal, as soon as it's personal, You're sharing meals, you're sharing a bed, you're sleeping, you got family, your clothes. These are heavy moon things that your moons are interwoven with each other. So in a relationship, if two people have opposite moons, your instincts, that's another keyword, your instincts or intuitions are tied up to your habits and what you reflect on. Oh, this doesn't feel secure. I sense this. So our intuitions are tied up to the moon. Hence, it gets its psychic things. We would call this, I remember this, you project it into the moment and you start getting feelings about what's secure, what's not. And then your mind and other factors comes in and work with it or deal with it or try to work around it. So before you can criticize how anyone else lives, how well are you living? Of course, if we're living well, we think we're way better off than anyone else. I wouldn't live like this. I couldn't live on the street. I wouldn't do that. But then you can be in a nice pocket of reality and suddenly there's a war around, you're having to leave your country, you're fighting for, there's no food, you're fighting for survival moment to moment, there's fear and difficulty. You'll do anything to get out of that, change countries, go anywhere. And then you have to set up a new set of lifestyle. That's rebuilding your moon. So immigrants escaping from a war, changing country, changing place, they have to rebuild a new moon. Usually a new security sense, a new base, a new home, a new foundation. And nobody would do that usually unless you have to, unless the old is so bad you got to get away from it. Most people live with 90% of people live within 50 miles of where they're born. Or a great number of people live within 50 miles of where they're born. They don't go much farther than that because it feels secure. The nature, the weather, all the little things that they're used to, that's their memory. It's not the same when you go out further. Okay, so home bodies, non-home bodies implies different factors around the moon. Everyone's got the whole thing. Everything before this moment for everyone, their memories, is their moon. Not the specific things you collected, but the whole package. Everyone will have specifics, day-to-day weeks. The daylight comes up, nighttime comes. Every day we're accumulating experience. Every month it's becoming a moon pocket, you might say, of memories. And then these pile up and they interpenetrate each other. So it's a vast thing. Okay. Any other words I'm forgetting? Probably, but we'll just start with this. If anything else comes up, I'll try and bring it in. Now, you'll see the symbols. And normally, a lot of people just use the crescent moon as a symbol for the moon. I tend to in a chart. When I'm writing, I would use the crescent moon, but when I'm working with a chart, I put the moon as a circle, with half of it dark, half of it light. And the sun is a circle with just a dot in the center. So you see, they're both the same size. They would stand out. That's how I draw them in the chart. It doesn't matter. It's just semantics, but I just put the symbols here to bring with it. Now, okay. No, not that one. This button here. Okay, so what we have to do now, it's really like scales of music. We have to go through each category in the signs and see how each category works and has its effect on the moon. So we won't be able to do this absolutely, but we're going to try to do it a few levels enough so it makes sense and you can see the process. So hopefully, somebody mentioned they didn't get their worksheets. I sent them out to everybody, but I'll just recheck the link and get them to you for next week. But you should be trying to do these for yourself before the class, because if you work on your own chart and you're thinking through this before, when you were going through the class, it's going to confirm, it's going to affirm, and wake up it'll improve how much you absorb. So it's the best way to go with this, rather than just listening to what I say and then writing down how that must have been for your life. That can get you in, but that's a 30% way. But if you do the work first on your own and you're trying to figure it out and you puzzle about it and you get something on it, what right or wrong doesn't matter. You're just working with it. When you hear it, you'll start saying, oh, there's the correction. It doesn't work like that. It's like this. And you'll absorb an awful lot more from the classes.